Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Is this sound okay? Yes. Yeah, okay. So, a couple of weeks ago, when Hamza messaged me I think it was about a week ago, to do the talk, and then asked me for a title, what would be, I said spiritual activism, and part of the reason of getting that title was to sort of buy myself some time, because it's so vague that it could be anything, and I could still try to think about, okay, what am I going to say? And I was putting it together, and I got it done today, and then I looked, I thought, this talk is really boring. So please just stick with me, I think it is important, inshallah. It might not be as exciting than the last topic was marriage, right, which I'm sure the hall was filled and much more exciting. But I do think this is important stuff that we do need to discuss. Because the Ummah is going through a very difficult time at the moment. Obviously this last year has been very emotional. It's been nearly a full year now since the genocide started in Gaza, and we're seeing it spread as well. And of course this brings out emotions in us. You know, we're very upset we see our brothers and sisters being killed, being brutalised, being humiliated. And if it doesn't bring out any emotions in you, then I would really be worried about your heart. Right? If you're able to hear these stories, see these horrific images, and it doesn't affect you, then there's clearly something wrong here, right? And you need to really reflect on yourself and think about your spiritual state. But we always say, you know, they're our brothers and sisters. We say this very easily. It's very easy to say this, our brothers and sisters. But do we really view them as our brothers and sisters? Are you responding in the same way? Are you feeling the same way you would if that was literally your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, or your child who's the one that's being killed, or the one that's being brutalised? And so I remember when last year, when the genocide first started, one of my teachers, he made a point that I said, we will not go a day without speaking about Palestine. And he made it a point, we had lectures every day, he'd always bring it up. And then one day he did bring it up, and people asked questions, and he just kind of moved on and didn't say it. And then the next day he brought it up again. So somebody asked that, Sheikh, that was weird. Why did you do that? You brought it up every day and then one day you didn't. And he said that I have a rule for myself, that I'm not allowed to talk about it unless I pray tahajjud that night. Now, why is this an important rule to have? Because as I said before, if that was literally your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, or your children, you would be up praying tahajjud every single night. Think about if any of you have ever had the misfortune of having a parent that's ill. How often are you devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Ya Allah, give him shifa. You wake up every single night. You put all this effort in. But again, we say our brothers and sisters are brothers and sisters. But are we treating them like our brothers and sisters? Or are we seeing them as these distant people that, yes, it's upsetting for a few seconds when we hear about the news, and then we continue scrolling and we move on? And so for us, it's very important to ensure we've got this spiritual connection, and that we're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we really recognise them as our brothers and sisters, that these are our children that are being killed. This is our mother that's been humiliated, our mother that's been abused, this is our father that's been killed, that's been brutalised, that's been maimed, and so on. And so I want to obviously reflect on then what should we be doing in response to this. But before that, I want to build this kind of picture, or to understand our context, living in the West, and our responsibilities because of this. And so I'm going to ask some weird questions and discuss weird things, talk about some philosophers, and you might be thinking, why on earth are we talking about this? But I will start to make sense, inshallah. So the first thing I want to ask you guys, but any of the brothers around my halaqah not to answer, is how would you define a religion? If somebody asked you, what does religion mean, what would you say? Just shout it out, anyone.
It's a belief system that composes of values.
A belief system that composes of values. Inshallah, anything else?
A framework that introduces a higher power.
A framework that introduces a higher power, inshallah. So, the next thing I'll ask you, do you think that in Islam, in Arabic, do we have an equivalent term for a religion? Right, there's some Arabs here, somebody shout out, saying, do we have an equivalent term for a religion? So possibly deen. But you know, like you're hesitating when you're saying it because you know deen means something else, right? So the thing is, religion is a Western term, and it's come about actually quite recently. And so therefore, the meaning of it, the definition, comes with that Western baggage as well. That what do they mean when they say religion? And so why is this important to know? Well, the Western world, their main primary interaction with faith is with Christianity. And so because of this, Europeans view all faiths through the lens of Christianity. Whenever they encounter a new faith, they try to always refer it back to Christianity in order to understand it. So I'll give you an example. When the Europeans first got to what we call America today, they met the Native Americans and they found that they used to always congregate in these centres. And so they call those centres churches. Why? Because they're trying to think, okay, based on my Christian mind, what's the equivalent over here? Now, whether what was happening in those places resembled anything like what happens in a church, were they doing sacred acts, or were they just meeting together just to chat? It doesn't matter. The point is, this is how they're viewing things. And so again, with Islam as well, when it comes to Judaism, anything, any kind of faith system, they're looking at it through this Christian lens. And so let's talk a bit about Christianity. How does Christianity differ from Islam? One of the first things is that Christianity is not a revealed religion the way Islam is. Now, what do I mean by that? Christianity does not come with this worldview and a scripture and a set of laws. What is historically done instead is take in, absorb the society, the culture around it. And so I'll give you an example of this happening. Christianity was the only major religion that moved its base. Where did it move from? Jerusalem to Rome. And so now when you ask where's the head of the Catholic Church, you say Rome. A place that St. Isaac never even went to in his life, but this is now the head of the church. And in doing so, they adopted the culture of Rome, right, of Europe. And this is why when you look at Christian law, what you see is that this was largely made up of the Roman law that already existed. And so Christianity has always had this idea of just absorbing what's there and saying that, okay, Christianity only comes with certain things, it doesn't come with it a complete worldview. You actually build the worldview based on other things. This is why, for example, even some Christian acts of worship, Christmas, for example, what are the origins of Christmas? It was a pagan festival that already existed, to do with the winter solstice, right? Nothing to do with the birth of Jesus, right? Nothing to do with it. But Christianity is absorbing from the culture that's around it. Now, this is the first thing that I want to say, that the European view of what a religion is involves the fact that religion absorbs culture, absorbs rituals from what's around them. This is how religion forms itself. The next thing is that Christianity and Western views of religion have been heavily influenced by some very important philosophers. Now, there's a lot, I'm just going to mention two that I think are very important. So the first one is René Descartes. Has anyone heard of René Descartes? You have. What do you know about him?
He's French philosopher.
French philosopher, right? Often known as the father of modern philosophy. So in Descartes' time, people were trying to understand the way the world works. And so they're trying to say that, okay, there's certain things that exist that are material, this table, these bodies, all of this I can touch. But then we also know there's certain things that exist that aren't material. Your thoughts, essences, all of these things. And how do we make sense of it? And so what he proposed was this thing called radical dualism, which is that material things exist, non-material things exist, and they're completely separate. They're just completely detached from each other. And so people started to believe like this, they started to view the world like this. And so your attitude towards many things changes. You start to see people as robots rather than people who have a soul, because the soul is something that's completely separate. You start to view nature just as something that you can utilize, right? Something that you can make use of. No longer something that you should actually respect because it has some kind of spiritual quality to it. And over time, people start to realize, well, actually, we can only know about the physical stuff, we can't know about the material. And so when you start to neglect that material, you get to a point where you just believe it doesn't even exist anymore. So all that exists is what you can look at under a microscope. And you feel like this is the way the world is today, right? Where people have become very materialistic. And so even though Descartes himself was actually a devout Jesuit Christian, his philosophy led to the kind of atheism that we see today. The next person I want to mention is called Ismaeel, who I think was maybe a German based in the name, I'm not sure. So he was a sociologist and an anthropologist. And he tried to make sense of where religion fits into society. And so he essentially said that, okay, Descartes has this dualism, and so there's everything in the world is from one or two spheres. And so he coined this term, the sacred profane dichotomy. Has anyone ever heard of this before? Sacred profane dichotomy. None of you went to Catholic school. Okay, I did, right, and we used to talk about it there. So everything in this world is either sacred or is profane. What does that mean? Okay, we're in a masjid right now, this is sacred. The second we step out, we're in the world of the profane, right? You have your prayer mats, your sajada, your Jannah, whatever you call it, and you're going to pray, that's sacred. But everything else, when it comes to government, school, all these things are in the realm of the profane. So this is one thing he coined. The next thing he said was that for society to progress, it needs to leave the traditional world and into the modern world. And what that includes is leaving behind religion, because religion is superstitious, religion is irrational, And so you have to leave the shackles of religion to become a modern society. And so, of course, Europe wants to be modern, right? It's very influenced by these philosophers. And so it says, okay, let's adopt this worldview of sacred profane, and let's also try to reduce the influence that religion has on us, because we want to be modern, right? We want to be rational. And so the church, because it's always been so used to just absorbing the culture around it, was just all too willing to take its place over here. And so what did the church become? It became ruler of the realm of the sacred. And so you come to church and we'll talk about Jesus, we'll talk about what do they do over there, they eat the bread, right, Eucharist and so on. We'll talk about confession, but when it comes to government, when it comes to education, when it comes to any of these things, that's profane, that's outside of the church. The church doesn't have a say in that. Now, this is how Europe then got to the point of how they view religion today. And so religion, organised religion, public religion, is seen as a threat to progress. Which is why, for example, in France, why did they ban the hijab? Right? Many Muslims will turn around and say, how does it affect you if I wear hijab? But the reason they believe it affects them is because they believe that religion should just be a private matter. You do it in the masjid, you do it at home. What is this bringing it to the public? How many of us have this phrase we hear, when you get to the office, leave religion at the door? Don't bring up religion in the workplace. This is something that's not religious. This is in the realm of the profane. And this hasn't just affected Muslims. In 2004, and I'm about to butcher this name because it's an Italian name, there was an Italian Jew who's called Rocco Bottiglione, and he wanted to run to become a candidate for the European Commissioner. And he was forced from his candidacy when it came to light that he agreed with Christianity's stance on homosexual marriage. Now he said, I'm not going to govern based on it, I just personally believe this. And even for believing that, the fact that this came out publicly, he was forced to remove himself from that position. And of course, even home here in Scotland, and I don't want to open that kind of worms, but we saw what happened, right, when Muslim politicians want to do things, what are the concessions you have to make? You have to agree that Islam, your religion, is a private thing. There's something I do at home, I do it in the masjid, and I'm not bringing it anywhere else. Now, where does Islam differ? Unlike Christianity, Islam is a revealed religion, right? We have the Quran, we have the Sunnah, and it provides a complete worldview and a set of laws. And so there is no sacred and profane dichotomy in Islam. There is nothing that's beyond the mulk of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Biyadihi mulk, everything is within His sovereignty, all of sovereignty is within His hands. And so there is nothing, there's no realm you can go to, there's no area of the world you can go to that isn't under the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we said earlier, okay, do we have a comparison for religion? And the brother mentioned possibly deen. So then if you look at the Sign Arab and it talks about what deen means, it says that the term deen encapsulates indebtedness, submissiveness, judicious power, and natural inclination. And so then this covers everything. It covers every single aspect of your life. And so to be a Muslim means that you view the entire world as a Muslim. That you have taqwa when it comes to every single aspect, that it's not that the second we step outside of this masjid we're no longer thinking as Muslimin. No, it's in every single thing you do. Even to the point where when we go to the bathrooms and we wipe ourselves, we do this as a Muslim, right? Even that's in the realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so even though Christianity might have this worldview which is based on religion just affecting itself in certain spheres, as Muslims we cannot have that worldview. Right? Our religion teaches us something a bit different. Now, what are the issues of having this term religion in the European understanding of what a faith is? Is that realms of governance and education, etc., they are things that are not to do with religion. And so think about, for example, education. What does education stand for today? And how would an Islamically influenced education look different? And so one of my teachers, Dr. Farah Ahmed, she has a PhD in Islamic education. She mentioned that education in the past used to be about forming a good human being, right? It was about instilling ethics and values and a worldview in someone and the type of knowledge they need to go out there and really think about the world, be a good thinker. Whereas what is education today? She argues that education today is about developing someone so that they can contribute to the economy. And so we'll give you the specific skills you need to get a job to boost the economy. And my wife gets angry when I say this because she's a teacher. But think about it, as a child, straight away, how quickly are you asked what you're going to be when you grow up? And what do they mean by that question? They mean, what job are you going to have? How are you going to contribute to the economy? And so what you're taught from such a young age is that the way to completely identify yourself is based on your job, it's based on how you're going to contribute to the economy. And so is this what an Islamic education should look like? Or is there more to life than just the economy? is there more to life than just your occupation? And so in Islam, we don't have this idea of there being the spiritual world and the physical world and they're completely separate, but rather they're intertwined with each other. And so Imam Ghazali asks these questions that he says, in terms of the outward and inward aspects of a person, are they distinct or are they two sides of the same coin? Do they not act mutually? Can they not reinforce each other? Should the internal not necessarily manifest as the external, and the exterior not become interior as? And so this reminds me of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says that in the body there's a flesh, there's something in the body, and if it's sound, their entire body is sound, and if it's corrupt, the entire body is corrupt. And what is that flesh? It is the heart. And so the state of your heart manifests in your outward actions. When you have a good heart, one that's full of taqwa, one that's close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then your actions have more barakah in them. You're able to achieve a lot more. But when you have a heart that's full of everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you can't expect your outward actions to be as fruitful. And likewise, external things have an effect on your spiritual state. And so when you watch things, when you look at things which are haram to look at, this affects your soul. It has a spiritual effect on you. This is why, for example, if you've been listening to music, it's very hard to have a khushu' in your next prayer, right? And if you've got a period of time where you block out music, you don't listen to it, the prayers are just something different. You feel so much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have so much more sense of presence in your prayer. And so this is the point that Imam Ghazali is making, that both of these things, they're not separate. They actually complement each other. And there's a saying in the Mythnawi that says, external beauties are of no avail without internal depths. And so we have to be spiritual and mindful in all aspects of life. Not just when we're in the masjid, but in everything. So what does it mean to be a Muslim in all aspects of life? What does it mean to have taqwa when you're an employee? What does it mean to have taqwa when you're at the shops as a consumer? Well, let's think about being a consumer. Obviously when we're shopping, we're careful to only buy halal stuff. We look at the products, okay, it's got pork, I'll leave that. But someone with taqwa thinks beyond this. Because as a consumer with an Islamic worldview, you don't just look at just the products, but you try to think deeper that what goes into this product, what goes into the manufacturing of this product, and is it tayyib? And so I'll give you an example, right? You go to Primark, you find a t-shirt for £10. Are you thinking what needs to take place for this t-shirt to only cost £10? Are you thinking about the child that's in the slave factory right now, what do they call it, sweatshop, sorry, that's having to do this in order to produce that t-shirt so you can buy it for £10? Are you thinking about all the children that need to suffer in order for you to be able to buy a new wardrobe every 6 months? Technology has done this amazing job at completely distancing us from the reality that we don't think about it. Whereas I'm sure if you were in the shop and you saw that child, you wouldn't purchase it. You wouldn't buy into this system, into this industry. But because it's so far removed, you don't think about it. But a consumer who's Muslim, a consumer with taqwa, a consumer with ihsan, they think beyond this. And they think, should I be putting my money into this? And so for us as consumers, we need to think that, is my purpose in life to be a Khalifa on earth? Or is it just to consume as much as possible? Do you really need the new iPhone just because your contract's finished, even though your phone works fine? Well, no, are you a slave of Apple or are you a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But often we become brainwashed. And if you're not thinking as a Muslim, you've not built as a Muslim worldview, you think, what's it got to do with Islam, me buying an iPhone? What's it got to do with Islam, me buying new clothes, me buying a new wardrobe? There's nothing to do with Islam. This is what the Western view of what a religion is. It makes you think like this. But as Muslims, we need to think, what would the Prophet do? Even thinking about consumerism, do you think about the effects that this product you're purchasing has on the environment, for example? The environment that you've been made a Khalifa of, right? Also says, that corruption has spread on the land and the sea by the hands of people, by their own actions. Think about the landfill sites that exist because of technology waste, because we purchase the new phone every single year or every 2 years. And you know, in the UK, subhanAllah, a few years ago, they made this big announcement, we've managed to reduce our landfill sites by X amount. Does anyone know how they were able to reduce their landfill sites? You're nodding, do you know?
I think we should hold this in the country.
Yeah, they paid Turkey to take it. So yeah, alhamdulillah, it's not in Scotland anymore, it still exists on this earth. And we can see the actions of this, the results of our actions. Right? We see rising sea levels. Do you know which country is the most at risk after there's the Polynesian Islands, and the next one is Bangladesh, the most at risk of being drowned. This is a Muslim country. Our Muslim brothers and sisters who will be wiped out, annihilated in the next few years if we continue this unsustainable level of consumerism. And so likewise then, another question that comes up is about purchasing from companies that do unethical things. Right, so as I said before, your consumption cannot be devoid of spirituality. You need to have taqwa. And so then we bring up the question of boycott. Okay, boycotting. And the first thing I'll say is this isn't a fiqh issue. Nobody can tell you it's haram or halal to do whatever you want. But I think it's important to build a prophetic worldview, as I said. And so I always try to think, okay, what would the Prophet do in my situation? And I genuinely believe, and you can argue with me if you think differently, I genuinely believe that if the Prophet ﷺ was here, and he knew that me doing business with this company is going to result in children being killed, and not just children in his ummah, I don't think the Prophet would do business with these people. I think he'd try to find an alternative. And I know for us sometimes it's difficult, it's challenging, it's inconvenient. But, as I said at the start, do you think of these people literally as your brothers and sisters or not? Because I know for a fact if this was literally my biological brother, I would buy an alternative from Coca-Cola. I wouldn't think, I want to have the next few minutes of joy drinking this drink knowing that it's going to kill my brother. I don't think any of us would be willing to do that. And so this is what I mean, that have taqwa in your consumerism. And even, inshallah, beyond this issue when Palestine is liberated, inshallah, just going forward, be mindful as consumers. Because this is also the realm as being a Muslim. That you're conscious about everything, not just about what you do in this masjid. So likewise, our activism cannot be void of spirituality and taqwa. And so we've got to the purpose of the talk, which, how long have I been talking for? I've got another 20 minutes. Okay, inshallah, I'll try to speed up a bit. So the first question is, should we be activists? Should we do activism? And so again, I try to think about what's the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. What did the Prophet say? He said that if you see evil, you change it with your hand. If you can't, you change it with your tongue. And if you can't, what do? You hate it in your heart. And that is the lowest level of Iman. And so the first rule is that as Muslims, we're not allowed to be apathetic. We're not allowed to be indifferent. When we see this oppression, when we see these evil acts happening in the world, we're not allowed to just turn a blind eye and not think anything of it. But the weakest form of Iman is the fact that you at least hate it. You at least wish it didn't happen. It at least affects you emotionally. That's the weakest form. But of course then, the strongest form is to change it with your hand, and most of us were not in that position. Okay, that's the people, the righteous mujahideen, for example, are in that position. And so one thing for the rest of the talk, I'm not going to even discuss what people in Palestine, in Libya, and anywhere, what they should do. That's none of my business. Right? I can't say that you should do this because I'm not the one that faces the consequences of anything that happens. All I do for them is I make dua until he gives them the right guidance, and then he protects them, and he liberates them, and he gives them nasr. But for us, as Muslims in the West, what should we be doing? What is a prophetic style of activism? What does a Muslim model of activism look like? And so far, the track that Muslim leadership in the West has tended to go down has been a left-wing model, which is influenced by something called critical theory. And this involves adopting a minority status, right? So we've all heard this, Muslims were minorities, we're part of BAME, was it black and minority ethnic? Basically anyone that's not white, we're all part of this, we're all minorities, we're all in the scheme, right? And what does minority mean? Now, minority has different definitions to different people, but overall what it means is that you're in a position of weakness, right? That you need the people in power to make special concessions for you. That's what minority means. Now, I want to ask you a question. The Umayyads, a very powerful, strong dynasty that existed in Islam, they were in power for about 100 years. By the end of their power, how many people under their rule do you think were Muslim? What percentage do you think were Muslim under their rule? Honest, you don't answer because I know you know the answer, but anyone else just try it out. What do you think? Not many. What does that mean? Give me a percentage. 30%. 30%. What do you guys think? Higher or lower? Okay, it was 10%. 10%. Now, were the Umayyads saying we're a minority? Were they saying, oh, we lack power? No, because power isn't just by numbers. And so, yes, we may be a smaller number. I don't know the exact percentage. I think maybe 4% of the UK is Muslim. Maybe if anyone knows for sure, then correct me. But while we lack in numbers, we have something, right? We have Islam. This really gives us more strength. This ultimately says you are the best of the Ummah. If all the nations exist, you are the best. Why? Because you enjoy good and you forbid the evil. Why? Because you have Islam. And so we have something to offer society, but are we doing that? We have this treasure that people are in need of. Earlier this week on Monday, I met a brother who reverted 3 months ago. His name's Hugh. And he was saying to us that if you go out in Glasgow on a Friday night, and please don't go out after this, but if you go out to town on a Friday night, what do you see? You see people throwing up on the streets. You see men fighting. You see women shivering, freezing cold while wearing next to nothing. And you look at these people and you think, they really need Islam. And the sad thing is they don't even know it. They don't know what they need. But this is our purpose of being here. And so many of us would always think the grass is greener somewhere else. How often do we think, oh, I wish I lived in Darul Islam, I wish I lived in the time of the Khilafah. But Allah SWT has put you in this time and place for a reason. This is something that Ibn al-Iskandari used to mention, that everyone always wants to be somewhere else. When Allah SWT has put you in the place, in the time and place where you're most likely to get to Him. And so Allah gives you a hand of cards, and with the hand of cards, that's your best opportunity to get to Allah SWT. And so why has He put us here? Why do we exist in the West? Many of us were born here. Why is that? Why is that the case? One of my teachers, Sheikh Hakim, he mentioned that it's no coincidence that Muslims tend to have more children than the rest of society. One of the reasons is because in Europe needs us. It needs Muslims because it needs Islam. And so our role being here is to be therapists, to offer Islam to the people around us who really need it. That when you go out on a Friday night and you see the state of people, you'll understand these people really need Islam. You know, these people, they try to convince themselves they're happy, when the reality is that they're really suffering. Because this is dysfunctional behaviour. To poison yourself every single week, to go out and throw up and not even remember what happened the night before, and you wake up with a headache and perhaps a black eye, and you've embarrassed yourself. This is dysfunctional. Right? This is something that's not the way for a human being to live. We've been created as the best of creation, we're not animals. So clearly they need something, and we have that something to give them. But are we feeling empowered? Do we feel like khulafat? Do we feel like representatives of Allah? Or are we just keeping this as a private matter? Are we buying into the Western understanding of religion and say, I'm not going to bring it up in the workplace, I'm not going to bring it up outside of the home or outside of the masjid? And so to go back again to activism and critical theory, one of the things with this is called identity politics. It's a paradigm that's been followed. And you ask yourself, okay, what's the cost of adopting this method, taking minority status, following this critical theory method? So identity politics often leverages something called intersectionality. What is intersectionality? It's the idea that all these different minority groups, you all work together because the rights of some of us are the rights for all of us. Okay, we hear this line quite a lot. And so, you know, you're oppressed because you're black, you're oppressed because you're Chinese, you're oppressed because you're a lesbian, you're oppressed because you're Muslim. All these things, let's get together. Because a combined voice is stronger than a singular voice. Now, what are some of the issues with doing this? What are some of the drawbacks of doing this? Well, I want to give you one example. People here saw the news in encampments, right? The encampments at universities. I spent the last year at Cambridge University, in Cambridge, and I used to visit the encampment at Cambridge University. And in the first few weeks, it was really nice. You go there, Palestine flags everywhere, some flags with the Shahada on it, all these things, right? After a few weeks, as the weeks go by, the flags are becoming a bit more colourful, and suddenly they're all replaced with rainbow flags and communist flags and Marxism, and everyone's a comrade and so on. And when you speak to the Muslim students, you realise that they're actually beginning to get influenced by the people around them. Because they see them, these are our brothers and sisters, they stand for what we stand for, they care about justice. And so you need to be careful, you need to be wary about entering these issues where you're teaming up with other people. And so the result is often that you compromise religious practice. And so I'll give you one example. Muslim institutions who argued, and alhamdulillah they're not doing it as much now, but this was very common in America, they argued that Muslims in the West should support the LGBT lobby in the fight for equal civil rights. And their argument, their rationale was, their rights are our rights. If we increase their rights, it helps all minorities. And then you see the state that caused it. And so a lot of those shuyukh in the US who said this, they're actually backtracking and realize we messed up here. And I'll share one of my experiences. Years ago, I was one of the delegates for the NUS, the National Union of Students. And this was a long time ago, so I think things are better. I mean, I'm getting old now. I'm nearly 30, subhanAllah. And you know, when I first started at MAB, I was younger than most of you in this congregation, and it felt like just a few days ago. But you know, my hairline's receding and everything. And subhanAllah, it reminds me of the Prophet who said that if you get to 40 and your good deeds don't outweigh your bad deeds, then start preparing for the fire. And the point is, if you've not fixed yourself by the age of 40, it's very difficult to do after that. And so I've got 10 years to fix myself, but we ask Allah to protect us and guide us, give us tawfiq. But when I was there, we went as a group of Muslims, and there was a body that was trying to organise our Muslims. And so they were telling us, okay, vote for this candidate, for this issue, vote for this. And repeatedly they were saying, let's endorse the LGBT candidate. Again and again. Even one of their votes was against a Muslim, and they told us to vote for the LGBT candidate. And when we brought why, they said, oh, because the Conservatives are the real enemy. These LGBT people, they stand up for us, they care about us. And so you realise, okay, well, strengthening them eventually comes back to bite us, right? Because yes, we can work together and help retain each other's rights, but there gets to a point where both groups come at loggerheads, when the rights of one group involves taking away the rights of the other. And so, I'll give you a clear example. I'm sure we're all sick to death of hearing about it. Think about LGBT curriculum in schools. We fought for these rights, we helped build this monster, and now it's at a stage now where we can't control what's taught to our children in schools. Think about gender-neutral toilets, and changing rooms, etc. And so now the next stage, their next level of rights involves taking our rights away. And so was it the right thing to team up and say, oh, actually we all work together and work for each other's rights? So am I saying that we can't work with other groups? No, that's not what I'm saying. Take the Palestine issue, for example. We don't own it, right? We don't say to people that unless you're Muslim, you're not allowed to come to the marches, you're not allowed to come to protest, this is our issue. We're not saying that. No, we're saying everyone's welcome. Because our aim is to spread awareness, so that the general public are aware of what Israel is doing, they're aware of the genocide, and they call on their leaders to stop it. What I am saying though, is that when you're at these marches, you always need to be mindful that are you influencing people or are you being influenced by them? The Prophet ﷺ, he used to influence people. He was not influenced by the mushrikeen in Mecca, he was not influenced by the Jews in Medina, no, he was the one influencing them. He was spreading Islam to them. You know, many of us, we think that, oh, these people in the marches, we think like, oh, they're on the same page as us. One thing, I'll just give you one specific group that's involved, for example, is the Marxists, right? So you go there, you always see socialist flags and communist flags when you're there. And when you're involved with them, you think they say the same things as us. They talk about, yeah, stick it to the man, oppression and structures, all these things. You think, subhanAllah, yeah, they're right, Islam's all about revolution and so on. Now, you actually need to understand what is it they believe in. And so I'll mention a quote. So before I mention the quote, one of the things that Marxists say is that all man-made structures, all societal structures, they're all oppressive and they need to be torn down. Now, what does this mean? They also include with this religious structures, because religion, they believe, is man-made and it puts certain people in power over others. The imam has authority over the person who comes in the congregation. The mufti has authority over the people who are seeking fatwa from him. They also say that families are an oppressive structure, right? The fact that a woman has to be a mother. And this is one of the quotes I want to mention. This is from a feminist Marxist called Maria Rosa de la Costa, and I hope I haven't butchered that too much. She said that motherhood is the pillar of capitalist exploitation. So is this what we stand for? Are these our comrades, as we say, or is there something deeply evil, deeply rooted in their beliefs? And so for us, we need to place religious priorities at the centre of our responses and how we do things. And so what is a more prophetic response? I would argue a more prophetic response is one that's focused on da'wah. Right? Because throughout all of the oppression that the Prophet faced in Mecca and the challenging political landscape that existed in Medina, he was constantly inviting to Islam. When we're facing oppression, do we ever make dua that Allah SWT guides the oppressors and changes their hearts? Remember when the Prophet made this amazing dua? He had these incredible oppressors in Mecca, people who were just evil. And he made this vow to Allah, Allah honour Islam through one of the Umars, whichever one you love more. Who is he talking about? Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab and Abu Jahl. Can you imagine the Prophet making dua for the guidance of Abu Jahl? And of course, Umar did have the better character out of him. He was more beloved to Allah, and so he was guided. And of course, we know Sayyidina Umar was this amazing person. But pre-Islam, Umar was someone very difficult to deal with. In fact, one of the early Muslims mentioned that Umar's donkey would become Muslim before him. This is how far away from Islam Umar was. But what did he become? He became a Khalifa. He became the one who the Prophet ﷺ said that if there were to be another Prophet after me, it would have been Umar ibn al. He's the one who's mentioned that Umar speaks the truth and Allah speaks the truth, because how many times does the Quran agree with Sayyidina Umar ibn al? But this is because the Prophet made dua for him. Are we ever making dua, Allah SWT guide our oppressors, change their hearts, bring them to Islam? Are we doing this? Are we trying to get da'wah? Are we reaching out to people? I'll give you a really amazing example. We recently had the riots in the UK. And some Muslims, their response was, yeah, I'm going to go out and show my strength, we're going to beat them up right on the streets. The Shabab, they were very eager to do this. And then there was a more prophetic response. One of the imams in Liverpool, his name's Adam Kelwick, he crossed over the boundary, over the barrier, and he spoke to the people who were doing the riots. And he asked them, what are you concerned about? And they said, we're worried about the safety of our children. And he said, I also worry about the safety of your children. I want what's best for them as well. And they said, we're worried that we're losing our country and you guys are going to just take over and oppress us. And he says, I want what's best for this country as well, and I want what's best for you as my neighbour. Now, which one do you think is going to have a better long-term outcome? Fighting fire with fire, or responding with something better? Because what does Allah SWT say? Idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Respond with something even better. And so that's the more prophetic response. But this is challenging for us. It hurts our egos. Right? The ego wants to be, I'm going to go fight, I'm going to go respond straight away and think rashly. But the more prophetic response is to be more measured, to have rahmah, to have wisdom, and think about the bigger picture. Think about the long term. But this requires us to have to fix ourselves. It requires us to have to work on ourselves. And this is what Allah SWT, when He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ, that Allah will not change the state of the people until they change what's within themselves. What does that mean? And so you are running out of time, so I'll just quickly mention 2 ways we can interpret this. So one way is a very just spiritual way of looking at it, which is, I'll fix myself, I'll avoid the haram things I'm doing, I'll try to do more ibadat, I'll follow the sunnah, I'll handle my things and Allah will handle the big things. A more pragmatic way is to incorporate that and other things beyond that, which is that I'll fix myself up. I'll stop doing the haram things I'm doing, and I'll gain knowledge, I'll have the ilm, and I'll gain the skills needed to effect change, and then hope that Allah SWT would use me as a vehicle to change the condition. And so this includes that spiritual aspect that you're trying to fix yourself up. But then part of this is your development, so that you can be one of the people who Allah SWT uses. Think about a community of people who have no ilm. Can this community actually do anything? Are they able to effect change? Are they able to do anything useful? Now look instead at a community of Muslims who understand their faith properly, who know how the world works, who are knowledgeable, who are intelligent, who are wise, who think properly, who work together. These can be the people who, after you've developed yourself, you're able to now change the system by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so lastly, I just want to end on this final note, that we always have to be reliant on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not be materialistic. And so whatever actions I do, I understand that Allah is the one who causes change. And that I hope that He uses me, as I've said again and again, He uses me as a vehicle for the positive change. Therefore, it's completely nonsensical to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my activism. To think that I'll do these actions which are completely against Sharia, completely against what Allah wants me to do, but this is the only way to get things to change. If you're doing this, essentially what you're saying is that I don't believe that Allah is the agent of change, I believe I'm the agent of change. This is what scholars call shirk al-isbab, right? The shirk of the means that are in front of you, because you're giving agency to material things rather than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas what do we know? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. That there is no change, there's no strength, there's nothing, there's the only agent is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we say, that fa'al illallah, there is no actor other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for us, we need to make sure that our actions, our activism is all in line with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then if anything does come from that, it's because of Him. And so the last thing I'll mention, ibadats, they have shurut, right? There's no salah without wudu, there's no umrah without ihram, and so on. And likewise, the Prophet mentions about a man who's been travelling and he's covered in dust, he's dishevelled, and he spreads his hands to the sky and makes dua to Allah, says, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. Well, his food is unlawful, his drink is unlawful, his clothing is unlawful, and he's nourished unlawfully. And then the Prophet says, so how can his dua be answered? And so we call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but if we're constantly doing things which are haram, if we're so just void of spirituality, where we're completely not close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all, if our hearts are filled with everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then how can we have the nerve to ask Allah? How can we think that our du'as will be answered here, when look at what the Prophet is saying? And so you need to fix yourself up, right? This is part of the problem. If we're completely spiritually away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we cannot expect the situation to change. But rather we purify ourselves. We purify ourselves and then we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make this change. And so ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to give us the guidance to do what's best. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to alleviate the situation of the Muslims all over the world, everyone who's suffering, and to unify this ummah and to give us strength. قولي قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. صلى الله على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.